An inspiring girl asks a police officer for help. The amazing transformation that followed. Lily stood at the edge of the crowded school hallway, her heart racing as laughter echoed around her like a cruel symphony. Overlooked, underestimated. She was just another small-town girl trying to navigate the tangled web of adolescence. With a single mom who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, Lily wore the weight of their struggles like a heavy blanket, stifling her dreams. Each day was a chore, trudging through classrooms filled with vibrant faces who barely noticed her presence. Lunch meant sitting at a corner table, the whispers of her classmates wrapping around her like a suffocating embrace, punctuated by the mocking laughter that spilled over with awful regularity. Today, her world came crushing down when a group of bullies decided to make her the target of their jokes. The sting of their words cut deeper than any knife, leaving her feeling raw and exposed. "Why do you even try?" one sneered, and as the others joined in, her faith in herself dimmed. Desperation twisted inside her. Would anyone ever stand up for her? Gathering the last shreds of courage, she approached Officer Thompson, the local officer known for his kindness. He'd always smiled at her during community events, exuding a reassuring protective presence. But when she poured her heart out, his brow furrowed in skepticism. "Lily, bullying can be tough, but don't let it get to you," he said, his voice steady yet dismissive. It was as if he saw her as an invisible speck, and in an instant, tension unfurled in her chest. She felt more insignificant than ever. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Heartbroken but unyielding, Lily turned her pain into poetry, scribbling raw emotions onto torn pages soaked in anguish. Each line was an honest reflection of her reality, a cry against the systemic oversight she and others like her faced daily. She poured every aching thought into stanzas that captured both frustration and a flicker of hope. Hard truths that mirrored something bigger, but were muddled in her mind. The moment she found Officer Thompson reading her poems, a flood of relief began to wash over her, nearly trembling at the thought of connection. Yet his eyes, wide with surprise and something akin to guilt, momentarily shifted her hopes. Would he finally listen? Really listen? As she watched him struggle with the weight of his initial dismissal, an unexpected bond formed between them. But their newfound unity was threatened by the bullies, who ramped up their harassment, turning Lily's battle into a nightmare of social media slurs and classroom gossip until it felt like a raging storm. Each night, she withdrew deeper into her writing, but the fear gnawed at her like a ravenous beast, threatening to swallow her whole. With every heartbeat, the stakes escalated. Would she break free from this paralyzing cycle of despair, or would she succumb to the insecurities festering in the shadows? There was no resolution yet, only the looming dread of what came next. Would the louder voices drown hers out, or would she find a way to stand tall among the noise? The following days blurred together, filled with constant unease and a tumultuous mix of emotions. The whispers followed Lily like an unwelcome shadow. She felt them linger at her back, as if they were a tangible force, both heavy and suffocating. But beneath that layer of dread, something began to flicker within her, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. As she sat alone at lunch yet again, the cafeteria noise swirling around her, it was not the taunts that struck her most. It was the unexpected smiles exchanged between classmates, forging connections that felt just out of reach. What did they see in each other that they refused to acknowledge in her? Desperation brewed in her gut, and she resolved to cultivate her voice. If she wanted to be heard, she had to shout, not with anger or desperation, but with the authenticity that thrived in her poems. With renewed determination, Lily started sharing her poetry online, anonymously at first. Each piece she posted became a small act of rebellion. The reaction was immediate. Her words resonated with others, sparking a dialogue. Comments flowed in, some offering support, others sharing their own stories of struggle, and Lily was astonished to discover a community beyond the school walls, a lifeline woven through shared experiences. She became addicted to the exhilaration of expression, the validation that came when someone reached out to say, "You get it." But standing behind the screen brought its own challenges. A chilling realization began to sink in. How would the world react if they discovered her true identity? The fear of exposure clawed at her. What if the bullies used her words against her, mocking her vulnerability? Even with these worries, she felt a growing certainty that her voice mattered. In her poems, she spoke truths cloaked in metaphor. The harsher realities of her life slipped through her fingers like grains of sand, transformed into art that challenged both herself and her audience to confront uncomfortable emotions. The emotional intensity of her writing resonated with others, empowering her to confront her own insecurities. One evening, Lily sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by crumpled papers, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating her latest piece. She felt bold, more unguarded than ever. Underneath her exhaustion lay an urgency to break free from the cycle of silence. She decided to confront her fears head-on. During her next poetry reading at a local cafe, she would reveal herself. This was not just an act of courage, but a testament, a vow to stand tall even in the face of adversity. Yet her determination was shattered the evening before the reading. As she returned home, her heart sank at the sight of her mother's tear-streaked face. A message had surfaced in their small town, a video, a distorted reflection of her poetry interpreted through mocking laughter, the bullies' voices echoing through the screen like a twisted rendition of her pain. In that moment, the very weight that she had fought to shake enveloped her again. The thought of being further ridiculed clawed at her resolve, igniting a fierce conflict within. Should she still keep her promise and share her identity with the world? Relief and trepidation battled for dominance within her. The moment of decision loomed. Would she walk onto that stage, risking the backlash, or retreat into the shadows, reeling from the very fears she had set out to conquer? The realization washed over her. There was no turning back now. The time had come to face her fears and uncover the depths of her strength. Would she reclaim her voice, or would she allow the echoes of laughter to drown her words? Suddenly, she recognized a powerful truth. In order to transform, to reignite that spark, she had to step into the light and embrace whatever came next. Would she find the courage to speak her truth, or would the shadows win? Lily paced her room, her heart racing as midnight approached. The cafe awaited her, a stage set for her to unveil a fragmented piece of herself. How could she step into that light, exposing her soul after such public mockery? The echoes of laughter taunted her thoughts. Each reverberation felt like a barrier built to keep her from venturing out. Yet, amidst the chaos of her internal battle, she unearthed a flameless resolve, one that had quietly emerged from the ashes of her fear. This was her moment, but it felt perilous, teetering on the edge of vulnerability. Wasn't speaking her truth precisely what she had dared herself to do? Sitting down, Lily faced the crumpled pages scattered across her floor like fallen leaves. Each poem had been an act of reclamation, a shift of power that transformed her pain into art. But now, those words felt like stones, heavy, unyielding. Could she carry that weight in public? Or would she collapse under the pressure of each scrutinizing gaze? A memory flickered in her mind, the feeling of sharing her first poem online, the rush of vulnerability faded by waves of support. Those comments had fortified her resolve as surely as any armor. Maybe henceforth, that supportive chorus, though distant, could traverse the walls of the cafe and bolster her confidence in the real world. Drawing in a deep breath, she reread her pieces, allowing the words to wash over her like a balm. They spoke of isolation, but also of connection. They sang of heartbreak, yet hinted at hope. The fragments came together, reminding her of why she wrote in the first place. She penned her poetry not just to be heard, but to share a universal truth. Every soul bears weight, yet every heart has the capacity to break through. Determined, she grabbed her phone, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I will perform tonight," she typed into her online group. Those fellow poets, strangers who had become allies in her journey. It was a commitment she made not just to them, but to herself. The instant the send button clicked, an empowering sense emerged, pushing her anxiety further back. Hours passed, and dawn swung in, breaking the darkness that echoed with uncertainty. The cafe stood before her like a lighthouse, its warm light beckoning her toward acceptance. As she stepped inside, the vibrant chatter filled the air, wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Yet the moment she spotted the bullies at the edge of the crowd, the dread surged anew. But she had chosen to rise beyond that threat. Instead of succumbing to fear, she steeled herself, recalling that the laughter had been hollow, devoid of truth. What they saw was not her, a distorted illusion born from their own insecurities. The time came for her to share. Standing there, she glanced at the audience, feeling the stirrings of her heart in rhythm with each pulse of emotion. This was about reclaiming her power. As she began to speak, each word flowed from her like a river breaking through a dam, unhindered and unabashed. The poetry rolled off her tongue, rich with pain and purpose, her voice fierce and resonant. With every stanza, the laughter faded, replaced by attentive silence. They were drawn into her world, into her truth. The performance stirred something profound within her. It became more than an expression. It was a declaration. She wasn't just sharing poetry. She was confronting those who sought to ridicule her, the shadows that birthed their power from her silence. Yet as she finished, the applause felt distant, muffled. She scanned the crowd, apprehensive. Would they still taunt her, or had she captured a glimmer of respect? The answer was heavy, still unclear, yet intoxicatingly close, teasing her with the promise of transformation. Through that small victory, a revelation ignited. But with it also came a profound query. How would she harness that newfound strength moving forward? Suddenly, the path ahead felt daunting, riddled with challenges yet alive with possibility. What awaited Lily as she stepped from that stage into a world that had changed with her? The shadows loomed larger, ripe with challenges, as if daring her to navigate through them once more. Which truths lay ahead, waiting to be spoken? Cool air brushed against Lily's skin as she left the cafe, her mind still buzzing from the performance. The applause, or the lack thereof, strummed notes of uncertainty in her chest. Outside, the stars blinked like distant memories, an infinity of possibilities shimmering before her. Walking home, she deliberated on the power she'd felt on stage and how it rippled through her. But could that power sustain her amid the biting critiques of her peers? Could she face them again? The very ghosts of laughter that had taunted her sense of worth? Each footstep grew heavier as she remembered the looks, the whispers. The shadows were not only external, they were alive in her mind, replicating the atmosphere of rejection she had known too well. At home, she sank into her chair, scrolling through her phone. The messages played in her mind like an echo chamber. You were brave tonight. You really captured the feeling of isolation. The supportive words from her online friends contrasted starkly with the memories of the crowd, and she felt an acute mental dissonance. What did it mean to be vulnerable in one space, yet ridiculed in another? A thought struck her, a fleeting idea at first, but it began to expand. How could she cultivate her voice beyond the intimate safety of her home and the supportive expanse of the internet? How could she transform this experience into a broader journey? Lily recalled the stark struggle of trying to share her art in a world that often belittled creative expression. Was there a way to channel this into a new project? A call for authenticity that could bridge the gap between her insecurities and the deeper participation she craved? Suddenly, it felt less about the acceptance of others and more about her own trajectory. She pulled out her notebook, its pages worn but familiar. With sharp clarity, she pondered. What if she offered workshops to help others find their voices? Inspired individuals could gather, unearthing creativity that lived beneath the layers of judgment and fear. As she sketched out her ideas, her heart beat with growing excitement. Yet a shadow loomed in her thoughts. Could she really lead others when she still grappled with her doubts? Who would listen to her? But like a quiet fire, a steady determination flickered within, reminding her of the courage it had taken to step on stage. She felt an energetic shift, an embrace of her identity beyond the bruises of her past. Her potential was clear, waiting to be unlocked. Lily's vision expanded further. Beyond the workshops, she could integrate her poetry, create an online platform that could foster a deeper connection within a community built on mutual respect. In that space, they could form bonds, challenge each other, inspire accountability among not just poets, but all who dared to share their stories. With each word she wrote, the ethical dilemma of leading became less daunting. It transformed into a seed of hope. What if her vulnerability could become a foundation for courage in others? To carry the burdens of her experiences and mold them into a teaching tool seemed perilous yet essential. She paused, contemplating how self-doubt could be a part of the process, validating it rather than burying it. As dawn began to break, illuminating her thoughts with gentle hues, a wave of satisfaction rolled over her. This was the first step, palpable and necessary. She envisioned potential participants sitting in a circle, sharing and fostering growth. It filled her with an electrifying purpose, yet fear still nipped at her heels. What if she failed? What if she drew the scorn of those who once laughed? But within that doubt, another voice whispered, what if she succeeded? What if this became a path to cultivate change? And therein lay a new question. Would she risk stepping out into this new arena, knowing that growth often accompanies discomfort? The prospect was terrifying, yet delightfully liberating. Determined, Lily prepared herself to reach out to individuals she admired, those who had inspired her journey. She would gather their insights, their strengths. She would find allies to stand beside her, creating a force big enough to face the lurking judgments. As she set her resolve, a new vision pulled at her heart. A gathering of poets and dreamers united in their pursuit to create a culture of acceptance and empowerment. Could she dare to step into that light and confront the shadows directly, using their weight to forge strength in herself and others? The sun crested the horizon, casting golden rays into her room. It felt symbolic, transformational. She had set forth a commitment to create, yet what lay ahead, confrontation or communion, remained uncharted territory. And so, the question lingered. Could the intersection of vulnerability and courage catalyze a movement not defined by mockery, but by authentic expression? Lily took a deep breath, her heart racing, wondering what awaited her in the chapters still unwritten. Lily's fingers danced nervously over the keys of her laptop, drowning under the weight of her aspirations. She had reached out to a handful of poets and artists whose work had sparked her interest, crafting a message infused with the kind of vulnerability she wanted to share with others. Yet, as she hovered over the send button, the familiar scruple of doubt clawed at her resolve. What if they laughed at her ambition? What if they dismissed her endeavors as naive? It took several deep breaths before she clicked send. A simple act, but it marked a significant turn in her journey, a commitment to pursue a path she had long skirted. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind of anxiety and hope. Responses trickled in with varying enthusiasm. Some were encouraging, others reserved, but each interaction chipped away at the ice encasing her confidence. She found herself sensing the contours of doubt reshaping into a fragile yet resilient belief. As conversations unfolded, Lily realized she wasn't simply gaining allies, she was absorbing wisdom that had eluded her in solitude. One artist suggested holding informal gatherings. Find a cozy space, invite people to share something that scares them. At first the thought petrified her. How could she facilitate discussions when her own fears loomed large? That was the moment she confronted a nagging truth. Vulnerability had power. The same voice whispering doubts now urged her to lean into these fears. With newfound certainty, she reflected on her own performance, realizing that openness had resonated where cleverness might have faltered. Could she encourage others to embrace the discomfort she felt so intensely? Deciding to start small, she booked a modest venue at a local community center, a place rife with the musings of creators who had both succeeded and stumbled. She'd invite participants for a free session, calling it an open space for expression. The title rolled off her tongue with childlike simplicity, yet it felt monumental. Days morphed into a blur of preparations. The room, once a mere shell, transformed in her mind. She envisioned chairs in a circle, candles casting soft light, the air buoyant with the scent of coffee and baked goods. Amid the logistical chaos, her inner voice grew stronger, a quiet mantra. This space was for sharing, learning, and growth. On the day of the gathering, apprehension ricocheted through her senses. As she arrived at the community center, sweat glistened on her forehead. Her hands trembled. What if nobody showed? But as the clock ticked closer to the start of the session, individuals began trickling in. Some friends, some strangers with eager eyes. Their warmth spread through her, and just as the first introductions began, a smooth serenity washed over her. Here was her chance to explore the depth of being human, raw and unfiltered. As the group took shape, Lily felt the pulse of shared fears and dreams coursing through the room. Each voice, each story deviated, yet melded into a larger narrative of acceptance. People spoke of discomfort, expectation, and the nagging fear of judgment. All feelings she'd battled herself. The more they shared, the clearer it became that this was more than just a workshop. It was a fledgling community. In the back of her mind, doubt still flickered. Was she truly helping anyone? Could her fledgling platform withstand the harsh reality of criticism? Yet, the sight of participants stepping out of their shells, their expressions transforming from hesitation to exhilaration, bolstered her spirit. At the end of the session, one participant, an emerging poet with a quiver in her voice, thanked Lily with tears in her eyes. "I felt seen tonight. I didn't think I could share my story at all." The moment ignited a spark in Lily's heart. It was a realization that a ripple effect had taken place. Each individual left with a piece of their vulnerability laid bare, and in turn, they could inspire countless others. But as she reveled in the successes of the evening, shadows emerged once more. Who would leap first when she confronted her old critics? How would she leverage this momentum now that she'd taken the plunge? The thrill she felt wavered. Questions loomed. What awaited her next? Would she truly hold the line between honor and criticism, solid as she teetered on the edge? Lily took a deep breath, leaning into the uncertainty of tomorrow. The horizon teased her with the promise of both acceptance and potential peril. Her heart raced in anticipation, her journey towards authenticity now taking curious, unforeseen turns. As she prepared to close that day's chapter, another question whispered insistently in her mind. When the moment arrived to face those who had doubted her, could she stand firm and reveal the strength she had begun to carve within herself? The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow in Lily's modest apartment. Sleep still clung to her, but the anticipation of a new day tugged at her, urging her to rise. The success of the gathering chimed in her mind like a delicate bell, each resonation a reminder that she had initiated her journey, but the path ahead remained uncertain and rife with challenges. As she sipped her coffee, the events of the previous evening replayed in her thoughts. The warmth of camaraderie lingered, yet their shared vulnerability invited a new dilemma. How would she account for those who remained skeptical, the critics who had silently mocked her ambitions before? Would reaching out to them with her new vision seem like an act of defiance or desperation? These questions shadowed her as she prepared for another day of work, typing messages to the very poets and artists who had once ignited her spark. It felt invigorating to engage with them, but this built momentum also weighed her down with the fear of rejection. What if they dismissed her efforts entirely? Arriving at the coffee shop where she worked part-time, the comforting smell of roasted beans enveloped her. As she blended into the familiar rhythm of brewing coffee and greeting customers, Lily felt a flicker of purpose. Each interaction became an opportunity to build her confidence, to practice the very openness she preached during her gathering. She learned to weave small personal stories into conversations, creating connections that felt genuine. One afternoon, while taking a break at a table in the corner, Lily noticed a young girl nearby drawing in a notebook. She observed the little artist's furrowed brow and concentration, and a strange determination ignited within her. Here was a moment, the kind she encouraged others to seize, to express themselves without fear. "Those are beautiful," Lily said, leaning closer to admire the drawings. The girl looked up, startled at first. "Thanks. I'm not very good," she said, her confidence wavering. Good is subjective, Lily replied, her voice steady. What matters is that you're expressing yourself. That's an incredible gift. The girl's eyes sparkled, curiosity igniting where doubt had lingered. The exchange stayed with her. As she mulled over it later, Lily recognized how critical these moments nurtured her belief in herself and others. Each interaction was a mini-gathering, a small experiment in vulnerability and encouragement. But then, a nagging thought clawed at her from the shadows of her mind. The upcoming gathering's theme was leaking into her consciousness. What if she chose to confront criticism directly? Could she bring her critics into the fold, inviting them to express their doubts and expose the comfort of shared vulnerability? As she shuffled through the email responses later that evening, a wave of resolve washed over her. Why not address those fears head-on? Why not invite those who had mocked her ambitions to participate in a special open session? It would certainly be a gamble, but therein lay the potential for monumental growth, for both her and them. This decision felt transformational, as if the pieces of her internal narrative had begun to align. The thread of her development had tension, a knot of uncertainty she was learning to untangle with each courageous choice. As she crafted the invitation email, her heart raced with exhilaration and fear. Would they see the value in her message? Would they agree to join her? As she pressed send for the third time that evening, a mix of excitement and dread coursed through her. The questions remained. Would this act of vulnerability resonate or repulse? Would her ambition be seen as audacity or audacity? Lily closed her laptop, the weight of these considerations settling in her stomach. The truth was, she had threaded a risky path ahead, one that could shape her self-worth and redefine her relationships. As she braced for the responses that would inevitably follow, a sound caught her attention. Her phone buzzed fiercely, an incoming message. Her heart raced to see who had initiated the interaction, hopeful yet nervous. She knew that whatever it contained could shift her trajectory once more. Lily took a deep breath, ready to confront both her excitement and fears. Would she discover the strength to continue this burgeoning path towards authenticity, or would she falter as shadows of doubt began to creep closer? A faint vibration jolted Lily from her thoughts. The message on her phone illuminated the screen, an unexpected response from Nina, one of the poets she had reached out to for the gathering. She held her breath as she read it. I'm intrigued by your invitation. I think it could be really powerful. A rush of elation coursed through her, quickly overshadowed by a cascade of doubts. Was Nina's interest genuine, or merely a fleeting moment of curiosity? What if this first show of support crumbled when the gathering took shape? Each step forward felt precariously balanced on the edge of a myriad of uncertainties, a constant tightrope walk between confidence and anxiety. Her day transitioned seamlessly into the evening, and she found herself wandering into a local bookstore on the way home. The smell of old paper and ink enveloped her, a cozy cocoon that had always felt like a sanctuary. She couldn't resist picking up a poetry collection from a shelf, its unassuming cover revealing no promises but potential with each turned page. The words of the poets whispered to her, urging her to embrace the complexity of vulnerability. She couldn't shake the resonance of her exchange with the girl at the coffee shop. Connecting with others through shared experience and stories was tangible and necessary. Each poet had once faced their own critics, risen above self-doubt, and crafted their craft out of raw emotion. Couldn't she embody this too? A thought struck her. What if she dedicated a segment of the gathering to stories of overcoming obstacles? Invite participants to share their personal struggles, not just the artists, but also those who had critiqued her efforts in the past. An authentic dialogue could expose invisible barriers, opportunities for growth buried beneath assumptions. This concept sparked an inner fire of determination. Lily began to visualize how this fit into her vision. She could create a space not just for affirmation, but also for grappling with fear. It was exhilarating and terrifying. She would not just call out her critics, she would invite them to share their vulnerabilities, encouraging an openness she yearned to cultivate. She jotted down notes, her handwriting frantic as ideas flowed without restrictions. This would not be a traditional gathering. It was to be a sanctuary for honesty, a platform for unvarnished dialogue. Perhaps inviting her critics could disarm them, allowing her to dissolve their preconceived notions about her ambitions. Yet, the The specter of embarrassment loomed large within her. Was she willing to risk the possibility of rejection, ridicule, and pain? Every shred of comfort and security felt like it hung in the balance, waiting for her next move. This was not merely about creating an event, it was about laying the foundation for her own evolution. That night she lay in bed, mind awash with thoughts. She had pulled the thread of a wider exploration. It was no longer just her journey, but a collective examination of doubt and bravery, courage and vulnerability. This willingness to dive deeper offered both promise and peril. As her eyes fluttered between wakefulness and dreams, a gripping realization crystallized. She was not the only one on the precipice. Everyone was. Struggling artists, unwavering critics, seekers of truth. They all danced along the same tenuous line she found herself upon. In that moment, she understood that stepping out into the unknown might just be the act of courage needed to cultivate real change. This gathering wasn't merely her pursuit, it was a fusion of shared experiences, and in it lay the potential to dismantle walls. Amidst this hum of newfound clarity, her phone buzzed again, pulling her from introspection. A notification from a group chat with her friends added to the mounting excitement and dread within her. "Guess who's coming to the gathering?" the message read. Lily's heart raced, but who? Would it only deepen the anxiety she felt, or provide the support she so desperately needed on this uncharted journey? Faced with yet another unanswered question, she grasped the edges of her blanket, awaiting the reveal that could pivot her plan once more. Lily awoke the next morning with feeling like a tightrope walker preparing for a more significant performance. The anticipation from the text lingered and festered. Who had committed to joining her? The uncertainty gripped her mind again, tightening the noose of anxiety around her. Yet, there was a flicker of hope hidden within the chaos. This could be the support she desperately craved. While sipping her coffee, she found herself gazing at her notebook pages, filled with a whirlwind of ideas and potential. A deep-seated ambition simmered within her. A sense of agency began to emerge as she considered the repercussions of those she might invite. Their narratives could serve to escalate the authenticity of her gathering. As she envisioned this platform of voices clashing and harmonizing, she felt an urge to personally reach out to each person. Driven by a newfound hunger for connection, she drafted messages to poets, artists, and, to her surprise, the critics. Each note was crafted with a fragility she hadn't quite managed to encapsulate before. How could she frame her invitation in a manner that beckoned honesty rather than defensiveness? She started with Nina. Her excitement over the reply outweighed her fear of rejection. She poured her thoughts onto the screen, explaining her vision and the profound purpose behind the gathering. As fingers hovered over the send button, her heart raced. It was both exhilarating and excruciating to allow her vulnerability, fully aware of the risk of being turned down or misjudged. Committing to this journey felt like laying the foundation stones of a bridge she'd long envisioned, spanning the abyss of her doubts. After pressing send, she turned to the next message. This one was for Stephen, one of her more vocal critics. Instead of conjuring retorts in her mind to defend her choices, she wrote from a place of sincerity. She expressed her desire to include him and illustrate that there was room for everyone, not only to critique, but also to reflect on their fears and hurdles. As she typed, she couldn't help but wonder, what would it feel like to stand in a space where each voice had permission to breathe? Lily allowed herself to linger on that thought, stepping away from her computer to stroll through the neighborhood. The familiar sights were comforting, but also monotonous. She craved something new, akin to what her gathering could spark. Energy poured out of her as she began to imagine the unexpected. Enthusiastic participation from diverse individuals offering stories that ranged from enlightening to devastating. The sun dipped low in the sky as she returned home, and her phone buzzed again. This time it was a reply from Nina, a concrete acceptance to attend. A flood of exhilaration surged through her, igniting a compulsive need to capture that feeling. Lily scribbled the moment at the top of her notes page. The first commitment, the fire lit. And yet as excitement enveloped her, the curtain of doubt returned. Would Nina stay intrigued when the gathering unfolded? Would she still reflect that initial enthusiasm in the face of their interwoven stories? The ominous shadow of second-guessing lurked again. Yet, as she gathered her materials and prepared for the subsequent steps, the fear grew smaller than the flame of purpose in her heart. She found herself daydreaming, not only about surviving this event, but also transforming it into something monumental, where others could face their critics as she was trying to face hers. But the complexities of courage still loomed. It was one thing to envision this, but entirely another to live it out, with real risks and potential heartbreaks at hand. Resolute but still apprehensive, she connected with a local hub she'd heard about, eager to explore venues that would suit her vision. It was almost paradoxical, the duality of hope and dread coursing in her veins. Just as she raised her hopes, she sensed a looming moment of confrontation, one where not only her critics but her insecurities would be tested. In concluding her day, she sank into her chair, surrounded by a whirlwind of notes and plans. Her fingers poised over the keyboard, contemplating her next move. How would she confront her fear of judgment? And would those who came to witness her journey choose to participate authentically, or only observe? These questions danced in her mind like fireflies, illuminating the horizon of what was still to come, each moment drawing her closer to unveiling the truth simmering just below the surface. Yet, with each fleeting sparkle, the pressure of her choices teased at her resolve, leaving her teetering on the brink of a decision that could reshape everything. What would she choose to confront next? Lily woke up the following morning determined to make the most of the positive momentum she had gained. In the light of day, her myriad of emotions had lessened, replaced by a more steadfast resolve. She could sense the whispers of doubt retreating into the corners of her mind as she envisioned her gathering not merely as an event, but as a crucible for personal growth and mutual understanding. The first order of business was to plan. Strategy, not just enthusiasm, was what she needed to keep her burgeoning fears in check. Sitting with her notebook once again, she mapped out a to-do list like a mission plan. Venue, confirmations, and logistics swirled in her mind like a tangled web of responsibilities that needed to be unraveled. Each checkbox represented a small step toward conquering both her uncertainties and the criticisms that had weighed heavy in her past. As she methodically began her outreach, she felt the thrill of every small victory. Texts to participants sparked excitement as they affirmed their contributions. However, her heart sank when she noticed that Stephen had yet to reply. Had her invitation felt insincere? Did he reject the notion of engaging meaningfully? Desperation nagged at her. But she was no stranger to hardship and rejection. Memories flooded her thoughts. The countless times she'd hesitated to share her art. The months spent silencing her creative instincts because fear crept in and whispered destructive tales. Was she going to allow that same fear to govern her actions now? Every time those dark thoughts cramped her spirit, she countered them with moments of bravery, and today would be no different. Fueled by newfound resolve, she decided to take initiative. Instead of waiting passively, she cooked up a plan to visit Stephen. Inviting him in person felt more genuine than a hastily typed message. Perhaps it would allow her to embody her vision better, making the abstract tangible. The hour had arrived, and the streets buzzed with life. Lily finished packing her bag with small tokens of her sincerity, a few books from her collection, a journal, and a heartfelt note, hoping that a piece of her passion would resonate with him when they met. She navigated the familiar streets that led to his apartment, her heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. As she approached Stephen's building, uncertainty tightened within her. The cowardly whispers resurfaced, taunting her with thoughts about how he might respond. What if he dismissed her effort? What if he scoffed at her vision? But an internal fire reignited within her, propelling her forward. She was not merely advocating for herself, she was advocating for a shift, a collective journey into the realm of authenticity. With each step up the stairwell, she weighed her value as an artist and a facilitator. The sound of her knuckles tapping the door echoed like a drumbeat, enhancing her internal rhythm. This was her moment to confront not just a critique, but a past that often clouded her confidence. The door creaked open, revealing Stephen, who wore a look of surprise mingled with curiosity. There was no turning back now. "Hi, Stephen," she began, her voice steadier than she felt inside. "Can we talk? I'd really like to share my vision and hear your thoughts on it." He stepped aside, letting her into the space that held her trepidations. As they seated themselves, the energy in the room shifted. She could almost hear the tension transforming into potential. There was a pause as they locked eyes, a silent acknowledgement that this conversation could either fortify their relationship or deepen the chasm of misunderstanding. With each word exchanged, she saw the possibility of real collaboration, a way to harness their differing perspectives. Yet as the discussion unfolded, she realized that stepping into the room was only the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead, and the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. Would he see her vulnerability as strength or weakness? Could they find common ground, or were their artistic philosophies too disparate to forge a connection? Driven by the flames of courage and haunted by the specter of doubt, Lily braced herself for the turbulent journey ahead. What was brewing within this dialogue could reshape the very fabric of her understanding, not just of Stephen, but of herself. The moment was ripe with uncertainty. Would the encounter redefine her path or reinforce her fears? Lily could only wait and see as the tension mounted. Lily sat across from Stephen, feeling a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. This was not just an opportunity to convey her vision for the gathering, but a chance to transform their relationship from one of conflict to collaboration. Stephen's skeptical expressions had shadowed her growth for too long, and now she stood at the threshold of redefining herself, both in his eyes and her own. As she began to explain her vision, sharing her hopes for an open space dedicated to vulnerability and mutual support, she noted the glimmers of interest emerging in his demeanor. She spoke of her experience at the Poetry Cafe, how each shared story could pave the way for genuine empathy. Stephen listened, and with each point she made, an undeniable shift began to happen. "Lily, I get what you're trying to do," he said, his tone softer, less skeptical. "But you realize that there are some people who might not be ready for this kind of openness, right?" "Absolutely," Lily responded, feeling a spark of hope igniting within her. "But that's precisely why we need to take that risk. If we open the door to honest conversations, we can invite change." She shared the stories of the young girl at the coffee shop, the poetry resonating online, and her determination to address her critics through this gathering. Each anecdote served to dismantle the walls that had once divided them, revealing commonalities amid their differences. In that warm, cluttered apartment, time seemed to suspend itself. The initial tension gradually dissolved, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. After they finished discussing logistics, Lily realized that they had navigated an uncomfortable but necessary conversation. Both parties had willingly exposed their vulnerabilities and fears, leading to a mutual understanding. After a brief pause, Stephen leaned back, reflective. "What if you framed the gathering as a way to address shared insecurities and critiques? Opening it up to everyone, including those who have doubted you, could be a big step." His words struck a chord deep within Lily. This was the very essence of growth she sought to cultivate. They had moved from conversation to collaboration, and she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. "I'd like that," she said, smiling genuinely. "If we can invite others to recognize their doubts and work through them together, then we create a community of strength and healing." As they finalized the details, an exhilarating feeling swelled in her chest. She and Stephen were no longer opposites. They were allies with a shared goal, and she felt a surge of confidence. The days leading up to the gathering zipped by in a blur of excitement and energy. Maya and other participants affirmed their commitment as word spread. Each confirmation stoked the fire within her, yet she also carried the weight of expectation. There were still naysayers observing from the periphery, their judgments awaiting inspection. On the night of the gathering, the community center buzzed with anticipation. As the audience filled the space, Lily stepped onto the polished wooden floor, thoughts racing. She had momentarily forgotten her previous fear, consumed instead by the transformative possibility that lay ahead. Taking a deep breath, she smiled at the crowd, their faces a mix of unfamiliarity and encouragement. "Thank you for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady. "This evening is about embracing our vulnerabilities, confronting our doubts, and recognizing that we are not alone in our struggles." With each word, she saw their faces shift from skepticism to curiosity, and as she shared her journey, articulating the power of storytelling and shared experiences, An unspoken bond began to knit itself through the room. Several participants took turns afterward, sharing their own stories of rejection, of fighting through doubt. Each exchange felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. It was a healing experience, not just for Lily, but for everyone present, including Stephen. At that moment, standing in front of a crowd of open hearts, she grasped something vital. Her worth did not hinge on the acceptance of others. Instead, she had cultivated a space for exploration and empowerment. As she wrapped up the gathering, applause filled the room, vibrant and sincere. Support poured in from those she'd never expected to connect with, and to her astonishment, she was greeted with warm smiles from former critics. Among the attendees, one familiar face approached her with admiration. "Lily, you really captured something special tonight. Your voice matters beyond measure," he said, a tone of respect that sent waves of satisfaction coursing through her. In that moment, Lily felt a profound shift in herself. No longer the girl confined by uncertainty, she had become an advocate for authenticity. Each person who had shared their vulnerabilities had added to her growing confidence. And without realizing it, she had achieved what she had longed for. Acceptance not just from others, but from herself. As she stepped outside the community center that night, the cool air brushed against her skin, invigorating her. The darkness of doubts lifted. She was no longer afraid of the shadows that had once threatened to engulf her. Lily had conquered her fears, stepping into a new realm of purpose and reinvention. In that victory, she understood that her journey was only beginning, but she could embrace the horizon ahead without trepidation. Each step she took resonated with strength, a symbol of a transformation she had embraced and embodied fully. The world around her shimmered with the promise of new stories waiting to unfold, and armed with newfound confidence, she was ready to write the next chapter of her life. Now, dear audience, it's time to take action. You need to subscribe now to not miss out on more exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and showcase your support. Your engagement matters. Comment below with your thoughts and theories. We want to hear how this story resonates with you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this amazing conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Your actions can spark an impact.